How does the Ixcel web program affect test scores in the virtual setting? My name is Caitlin Luke, candidate for the Master of Education in Educational Technology Leadership degree. This portfolio defense is presented on this 14th day of April 2021. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher because I was surrounded by influential teachers my entire life. I began my educational journey at Nicholls State University in 2010. I received my bachelor's degree in 2013 in Human Performance Education, also known as Health and PE. I have always been passionate about exercising and having a healthy body and mind. I have been teaching for 8 years now with experience in middle school science, high school biology, elementary PE and science, and adaptive PE. I have been teaching virtually at University View Academy for the past 3 years. I have come to enjoy using technology in education and would love to someday hold a technology position. I chose the topic of using Ixcel in the virtual classroom because there are not many virtual test prep programs available to students at UVA. It is a tool we do have access to, and I was curious to how it would affect my students' scores, and there was not much previous research on this topic. The popularity of virtual schools is on the rise. There is a need to provide students with the proper tools they need to succeed on standardized tests. Standardized test scores and graduation rates in the virtual setting need to improve. And there is also low performance of virtual students on standardized tests. Fiona Hollins and Yelin Pan's 2018 study on math tools provides a theoretical context that guided this study. The lack of research on online tools. Few schools and districts are willing to participate in such rigorous studies necessary to prove that online tools such as Ixcel work and are cost-effective. Similarities in grade level in the framework on this research and the study by Hollins, and both of the studies use the same Ixcel tool but different subject areas. The following research question guided this study. How does the Ixcel web program affect test scores in the virtual setting? My review of literature focused on the topics of increased usage, advantages and disadvantages of standardized testing, enrollment, and performance of virtual learning, and Ixcel and other online tools. Increased usage. The average U.S. student takes 112 required tests during K-12 years. Some advantages of standardized testing. It gives teachers a clearer vision of the objectives they need to focus on in the curriculum, and test questions are unbiased and consistent. Some disadvantages. Teachers spend increasing amounts of time on test preparation. These tests limit the curriculum to what was covered, the expense of it, the time to prepare and give it, and it restricts the educator's ability to use a variety of teaching and testing methods. There was much research that focused on the increase of enrollment in virtual school. Miron's study was on the K-12 Inc., which is the nation's largest virtual school. The highest percentage of students enrolled were white. Brick and mortar and virtual schools had relatively the same percentage of Black students. Hispanic and low-income students were underrepresented in the virtual school enrollment. The fewest percentage of students enrolled were those who spoke English as a second language. Disabled and at-risk students have gradually increased over the past few years. Middle school grades have the highest enrollment in this system. Molnar's study focused on the concerning overall effectiveness of virtual schools. According to the National Education Policy Center, it concluded that there was an overwhelming poor performance. According to the K-12 Inc. study, the majority of their schools did not meet the adequate yearly progress, and the graduation rate was approximately 50%, while brick and mortar schools in the same states graduated 79%. The studies by Hollins and Pan and Van Ruler focused on Ixcel, which is an interactive web-based tool. It provides practice and reinforcement for skills in the following subject areas of math, ELA, science, and social studies. Poor performing math students use before-school online sessions to practice multiplication skills. In this study, the fourth grade students had better results on the California Standardized Test. Van Ruler's study had a control group that consisted of 95 traditional face-to-face learners. The experimental group consisted of 105 students who completed 38 minutes of Ixcel math per week. In the results, the treatment group performed better on the MAP assessment, improving its score by 5.64%. The control group only increased by 4.20%. Ixcel proved to have a positive impact on student achievement in this state testing situation. When planning this study, there were steps to follow. First, the participants needed to be enrolled at UVA in the 2020-2021 school year. They also had to be in the researcher's fifth grade science class. Students were chosen using a non-random sampling based on who took the pre-test at the beginning of the school year. Each group consisted of 20 students of high, medium, and low ability. The variables included were students that pre-tested and post-tested using a teacher-made benchmark assessment. The data collection process included the study taking place from August to December of 2020. The experimental group used the Ixcel test program 1 day a week. The other group received the same instruction, but they did not use the Ixcel program. The data was then displayed and analyzed in a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. The questions on the assessment were pulled from the Louisiana Believes Eagle 2.0 and the testing tool Edulastic. To analyze the data, the researcher examined the difference of scores on the fifth grade science benchmark assessment of students who used Ixcel versus those who did not. The control group did not participate in the Ixcel program. The experimental group of 20 students of varying abilities used Ixcel once a week to prepare for standardized testing. The first piece of data that was compared and assessed was the overall growth between the two groups. As we view the graph, we can see that the control group improved by 8.4 points from the pre to post test. The experimental group only increased by 1.75 points. Almost half of the participants in the experimental group did not perform better on the post test after receiving the Ixcel training once a week. The individual student growth in the control and experimental group is shown in these chart comparisons. The data show that the Ixcel Web program did not greatly affect overall student scores on standardized testing. Some individual scores did increase in the experimental group. However, the control group also had individuals who improved. More research would be necessary to figure out if the Ixcel program would be a tool to help improve standardized scores in the virtual setting. Possibly using the program for a longer time span and for more than once a week would positively affect student scores. Student scores continue to decline in the virtual setting. In summary, the findings show that the control group performed better from pre to post test, while the experimental group's class average declined. 45% of the students in the experimental group had an increase in their scores. 70% of the students in the control group brought their scores up from pre to post-test. There was not a significant correlation between the use of the Ixcel program and increased student performance to suggest a causal effect. In conclusion, previous available research was done on the Ixcel math program. No studies were specifically based on Ixcel science. Most of the previous results seem to show a greater improvement compared to this current study. One study compared schools who use Ixcel for 1, 2, or 3 years. The performance of these students was greater in the 3-year span. Past research was also limited to brick and mortar schools. This study was limited to half a school year, where previous studies were done at a minimum of 1 year. And most students who participated weekly in the Ixcel were of higher ability, attended live sessions, and completed their schoolwork on a daily basis. There needs to be more research on the Ixcel science component, standardized testing in all schools, and having an actual teacher present during the use of Ixcel could possibly impact the growth of a student. Possibly including multiple teachers in this study, and students of higher ability may feel more comfortable navigating through the program. From this experience, I have become a more confident writer in research, gained self-confidence, self-discipline, and time management skills. I have become a better multitasker and learned to be more open-minded and objective. I also see the importance of relying on facts and results and not letting previous knowledge influence research. This study also gave me a greater awareness that there needs to be more research on Ixcel science in the virtual setting.